A very warm welcome to the new episode of Ink and Insights. This is your host Sumit Sharma Samir. This is a Nepal-based podcast, and if you are interested listening to the thought leaders and Nepali influences from around the world, please subscribe to my channel. I'm extremely pleased to welcome Professor Katharine Hayhoe in my program today. Katharine is a globally renowned atmospheric scientist who studies climate change and why it matters to us here and now. She is also a remarkable communicator who has received the American Geophysical Union's Climate Communication Prize, the Stephen Snyder Climate Communication Award, the United Nations Champion of the Earth Award, and been named to a number of lists, including Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People, Foreign Policy's 100 Leading Thinkers, and Fortune Magazine World's Greatest Leaders. Her TED Talk, The Most Important Thing You Can Do to Fight Climate Change, Talk About It, has more than 4 million views, and her most recent book is Saving Us, a climate scientist case for hope and healing in a divided world. Katharine has served as lead author on the second, third, and fourth U.S. National Climate Assessment and an author on the fifth National Climate Assessment. She also hosts and produces the PBS digital series Global Weighting and serves on advisory committees for a broad range of organizations, including UBS, Netflix, King Philanthropies, and the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. Katharine served as chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy and a Paul W. Horn Distinguished Professor and the Political Science, endowed professor in public policy and public law at Texas Tech University. She has a BSc in physics from the University of Toronto and an MS and PhD in atmospheric science from the University of Illinois, is a fellow of the American Geophysical Union, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the American Scientific Affiliation, and has been awarded honorary doctorate from a number of universities. It's such a pleasure to have you in my show, Katharine. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Katharine, it's very important sometimes to even understand from a globally renowned scientist like you is, can you please share a pivotal moment in your career that solidified your commitment to climate science?
Yes. So as you heard in my very long bio that you read, my undergraduate degree is actually in physics and astronomy. And so the first research that I did as a scientist was not about our planet or climate. It was about stars and galaxies.
Wow.
And so what changed my career was when I was still a student and I needed an extra class to finish my degree in physics and astronomy.
Right.
And so I was looking around, and this was back 25 years ago. There was a brand new class on climate change that a new professor was offering for the first time at my university. And so I had learned about climate change in school, and I knew that climate change was a serious environmental issue that would affect nature and it would affect the future, but I still thought of it as an issue that was far away from us.
Right.
That it would affect, people in the future, or would affect people who live far away, but not me, not my life. So I took that class, and I was very surprised to learn. And again, this was 25 years ago, not today. I was surprised to learn that climate change was already happening today. It was already affecting us now. It was affecting, obviously, plants and animals, but also it was affecting people. Right. And what made the biggest difference for me was when I learned that it affects us all, but it doesn't affect us all equally.
True.
So the people who have done the least to contribute to the problem are the people who are being impacted the most, and that's not fair. And so for me, that is what made me decide to become a climate scientist, because it affects people, and it affects the people who didn't cause the problem in the first place.
Absolutely, absolutely. But as both a scientist and a communicator, how do you balance the technical aspects of climate science with the need to make it accessible to the public?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And you are really just putting your finger on all of the inflection points in my life. So the first inflection point was when I decided to study climate science instead of astrophysics. Right. But so then I chose a field of research that I thought would be useful. So my first research was focused on how do we reduce our emissions of heat trapping gases that are causing this problem. And so I was studying not only carbon pollution, but also all the other gases that we produce, like methane and nitrous oxide, and how we could easily reduce those first and quickly to make a difference short term while we were still working on carbon.
Right.
And that's important. But then about probably 10 years after that, I got asked to participate in a research program that was focused on the area where I'm from. I'm from the Great Lakes area. I'm Canadian, just from the other side of the border. And the Great Lakes are these amazing bodies of fresh water in the middle of North America that have unique ecosystems. They support all types of human and other natural life around them. And I was asked to participate in an assessment of how climate change was affecting my home, the place where I grew up, the place I love.
Right.
And that was where I realized that we are still making decisions based on the past.
Okay.
We're still making decisions based on the way things used to be at a time when climate is changing faster than any time in human history. It's as if we're driving down the road to the future, but we're looking in the rear view mirror. So we're only looking backwards, and we're trying to make it around a curve that's bigger than any curve we've ever had. So that was when I decided to change what I studied, to look not only at what's causing the curve in the road, but how we can get around the curve. And so I started to look at what is happening in the places where all of us live, not just where I live. So what is happening in our cities? What's happening in the places where we make decisions about our food and our water and our homes? And so now I look at the different features that are possible depending on the choices that we make today. So that was sort of the second inflection point in my career. But then there was a third one, which you asked about at the same time, which is I realized that we could have the best science, but if people don't understand why it matters, if they don't connect everything we know here to why it matters here, who cares? So that was when I decided I realized I had to not only do the science, I had to help people understand why it matters, because we all want a better future. We all have people we love, places we love, things we love. And if we don't understand how climate change affects everything we love, we won't do anything about it.
So, Katharine, in that context, how do you approach the challenge of communicating the urgency of climate change to those who may be skeptical or disengaged?
Well, interestingly, the number of people who are skeptical is a lot less than people think.
Oh, wow.
So I'm a Canadian, and before I moved to the US, I had never met anyone who didn't think that climate change was real or serious.
Right.
And now that's not to say we don't have them in Canada too. I've learned that we have them in every country.
True.
So, yes, probably even Nepal, right?
For sure, yeah.
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 Because people are people. Humans are humans.
Yeah.
But now, so I moved from Canada to Texas, which, you think of Texas as the home of the oil and gas industry, where, people are very politically conservative, and there's lots of people who would say it isn't real.
Right.
Well, across the whole United States, the number of people who dismiss climate science as something that's not real or fake or a hoax is 11%.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
11%.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the US, 2/3 of people are worried about climate change.
Wow.
And those numbers are larger in Canada, Australia, the EU, much larger in places like Nepal, Latin America, Africa. So most people are worried, but they don't know what to do. You ask people, are you worried? They say yes. Will it affect future generations? Yes.
Yes.
Will it affect you? I'm not sure. Do you know what to do about it? No. So I've realized the biggest gap is not the gap between it's real or it's not real. The biggest gap is between I understand it's real and I'm worried. That's my head. But I don't understand how it affects me. And there's another gap between the heart and the hands. I don't know what to do.
Absolutely.
So that's what a lot of the work I do now focuses on, is trying to help people connect the head to the heart to the hands. Because if we had everyone who's worried about climate change activated, who cares about the 11% who say it isn't real?
True. Yeah. So, Katharine, it's like, we all know that we all die, but it looks like we also know that it's not us who is going to die, right?
That's what we think. Exactly. You put your finger on that too.
Right, right. So, what role does storytelling play in your climate communication strategy then?
That's a great question because as a scientist, I don't think of myself as a storyteller.
Right.
As a scientist, we always work with data and information and numbers and facts. But again, all of that is up here.
True.
And as humans, even as scientists, we make decisions based on our heart.
Right.
So, what scientists have shown is that scientists who study the brain, they have shown that when we tell stories, that our brain waves synchronize with each other, that we are able to empathize with each other and understand each other better, and then maybe make decisions that are not just selfish decisions based on me, but decisions that incorporate others as well. And so, even though I'm a scientist, I feel like I've had to learn to tell stories, and those stories are much more effective than all of the data.
Right.
So, and scientists are still creating these giant reports full of data, but if you just tell a story that hits somebody in the heart, that could affect so much more change than all the data in the world.
Right. So, and on the real threat side, what recent developments do you think in climate science should be more widely recognized by policymakers?
Ooh, I like that. I'm very interested in the science of attribution.
Right.
So that's the science where you take an extreme weather event, and we know we've always had extreme weather events before. We've always had floods, droughts, heat waves, wildfires, cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes. Those all occur naturally.
Exactly. Yeah.
But climate change is loading the weather dice against us. So it's like we have this pair of weather dice, and the warmer the world gets, the more sixes and sevens, and even maybe an 8 we have on our dice. And so 20 years ago, when you had a extreme weather disaster, I would get a phone call from a reporter, and they would say, "Is this climate change?"
Okay.
And every scientist would say the same thing. Every scientist would say, "We can't attribute any one event to human-caused climate change, but we know that over climate timescales of 20 to 30 years, this event is getting more frequent or more dangerous or more damaging."
Right.
We don't say that anymore. Now, for one specific event, we can actually say climate change made this event 7 times more likely, or 150 times more likely, or climate change made 40% more rainfall, or climate change was responsible for 3/4 of the damages that happened. Or in the case of glacier lake outburst floods, which is a specific type of extreme event that happens in Nepal more frequently than most other countries in the world, we can say those glaciers would not even be melting at all if it were not for human-induced climate change. Because according to natural factors right now, the world should be very, very slowly cooling. And instead, it's warming faster and faster. So in the case of some extreme events, like glacier lake outburst floods, we can even say that is all human-caused climate change. And so when we can assign responsibility for part or even all of an event to human choices, and then on the other side, we can assign responsibility not just to countries, but to companies for how much heat-trapping gases they produced, I feel like there is a great potential to say, you just cost us this amount of money, and you're responsible for that. And so that, I think, is at the cutting edge of where science is today.
So on that context, how can individuals really, effectively advocate for stronger climate policies at the local and national levels?
That is really the most important thing that we need to be doing.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, I live in a continent, North America, where people have some of the highest personal carbon footprints in the world. So per person, people who live in North America and Australia produce the most heat-trapping gas pollution of anybody on the planet. And so often when we say, what can I do as an individual? If people live in a high-emitting country, they often focus on their personal footprint. But here's the thing. a big reason why people have such large footprints is because of the system we live in.
True.
So for many years in Texas, I lived in a place where there was no public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
And when I lived in Canada, I didn't have a car because I lived in a place where there was public transportation. So I took public transportation everywhere.
Exactly.
But then I lived in a place where there was no public transportation. So that meant that I had to choose different ways to get around. I didn't have a choice of how to live.
Right.
And so even in a high income country, I'm convinced from the research and the social science that the most effective thing we as individuals can do is to use our voices to change the system.
Right.
And what if we live in a place where we don't have a high carbon footprint? What if we live in a country where we have a very low footprint? As many people do in Nepal and most countries in the world, people have low footprints.
Right.
What can we do there? Again, our voices are so important because everybody wants a better future with enough food, clean water, education, a safe place to live, basic health care. We need all of those things, and electricity is most highly correlated with human well-being. Not energy in general, electricity specifically. We need electricity. And we need people to be able to access basic things like the Sustainable Development Goals: no hunger, no poverty, gender equity, access to healthcare and affordable energy. But we need to be able to get those things in ways that do not pollute, in ways that do not make climate change worse, in ways that do not destroy the nature that supports all of our lives, the oxygen we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. It all comes from nature. And so we need to be using our voices to be advocating for sustainable development. And if we live in a high income country, to be advocating for transitioning quickly from unsustainable to sustainable development.
Right.
And it's really interesting because I'm just reading a new book right now by one of my colleagues, Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who is an ocean scientist. But her whole book is about the power of using our voices in civic engagement.
Exactly.
In showing up with our cities, the places where we live, the schools that we go to, the religious organizations that we're part of, the company that we maybe work for, and using our voice to say, what can we do together to make a difference? Because I'm convinced we cannot fix these problems alone, but I know we can fix them together. And our voice is what connects us.
Right. Catherine, so there's also a problem, the debate on the social science is also kind of focused on, right, when people used to engage on a lot of different civic engagements in the past, now they are engaged many times in their machines. So it seems that even mankind seems to be living in their own silos and kind of cut off from the, right? So in that context, what do you think what are some of the promising technological or social innovations that give you hope for the future of our planet?
Technology is a tool. Right? We can use it for good or we can use it for evil. Unfortunately, it's often more easy to use it for evil than for good. So social media can be very polarizing and very isolating. All of the technology that we have developed to produce more and do more and have more is producing all of this pollution and all of these climate warming gases. We've been using technology in ways that has made our life better in some ways. It's extended our lifespan. It's made more people able to be educated and travel, but it's also had all kinds of side effects also. So when we look at technology, and there's a lot of debate, for example, going on right now around AI. So take AI as an example. AI can be a tremendous tool for good. So for example, you can use AI to figure out how to be more efficient with our energy because we waste so much of our energy. About 2/3 of the energy we produce is wasted. And AI can help us become more efficient and not waste so much energy. So we don't need so much energy. So there's more energy to go around. The same goes with food. Around the world, we waste between 30 to 50% of our food when people go hungry. So we can develop all types of technology like stickers you can put on fruit and vegetables that keep it from going bad for another week. I mean, that's just such amazing technology that will help so many people, lift them out of poverty. It will help farmers sell more of their food and support their families better. There's so much technology we can use for good, but then there's a lot of technology that has harmful side effects. So this is
Exactly.
why technology alone won't fix it, because we also need regulations. We
Right.
need policy. We need to bring ethics and morals into the discussion between what is right and what is wrong. Are we
Hmm.
considering the needs of everyone when we make these decisions?
Right.
We need it all. And so when people ask me, I'm not a scientist, what can I do to make a difference? My answer is, well, we need you, whoever you are. We need
Right.
people who
Right.
have every type of expertise, every type of interest, every type of passion. We need people across the entire spectrum to talk about this issue and help us bring all the ideas to the table, from everything from philosophy and theology and ethics to communication and media and marketing to engineering and computers and other advanced technology, to obviously people who understand food and water and nature, and then people who study people who study government, people who study economics. We need it all. Everybody has something to contribute to a better future.
Right. 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 And how do you see the role of renewable energy in evolving the fight against climate change?
Renewable energy is huge because, as I mentioned, electricity is very highly correlated with human well-being.
Hmm.
Electricity means you can have refrigeration, so your food doesn't go bad. It means that you can actually run a pump with water, so you don't have to walk 5 miles to get water.
Hmm.
Electricity means you can study for school and you can have lights at night. Electricity means that women can walk safely around after dark.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Electricity means that you can keep medicines refrigerated. It means that you have internet so that you can connect with the rest of the world and share incredible ideas with people on the other side of the world and build
Mhm.
communities that you would never have had before. So
Yeah.
electricity is so powerful, but many countries that are low income countries, a big reason why they're low income is because they didn't have access to affordable coal, gas, and oil for the last 200 years.
Yeah.
And the wealthy countries are the ones that did have access to those sources of energy.
Right.
But now we know that those sources of energy are not only driving climate change,
Hmm. Hmm.
the pollution from burning coal and gas and oil kills almost 10 million people a year.
Oh.
That's about the same number as the first year of the COVID pandemic, but it's happening every
Oh.
year.
Right. So we never take notice of that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So we need electricity, but we don't need electricity from coal and gas and oil. We need it from
Mhm.
clean sources like wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, tidal, all of
Right.
these different sources of energy that, guess what? All of the countries that don't have coal or gas or oil, they have wind, they have sun, many have
Absolutely.
tidal, many have hydropower. So
Yeah.
we need these sources of energy because that is the only way that we will meet the sustainable development goals. And in fact, affordable energy is one of the sustainable development goals. That is what
Right.
will lift people out of poverty and supply the food and the water and the resources they need. But we can't do it the way we did it 200 years ago.
Right.
That won't work.
Right. Right. And what role do you see for, indigenous knowledge and practices in shaping our response to climate change?
Oh, that is so huge. So I was aware of the importance of indigenous knowledge before I joined the Nature Conservancy. I
Right.
work for the Nature Conservancy as their chief scientist, and we work in 80 countries around the world, working with people and nature to ensure that people have the food and the water and the clean air that they need.
Right.
And so, working with the Nature Conservancy, I've learned so much about the fact that we have a climate crisis, but we also have a biodiversity crisis.
Hmm. Exactly.
And our life depends on nature. Nature
True.
doesn't need us. We need nature. And if nature cannot support life on this planet, we're going to be the first to go. So
I know.
caring about the biodiversity crisis is not altruistic. It's very selfish because
Right.
we humans depend on this planet to provide our life. So 80% of the biodiversity on this planet is supported and managed by indigenous people on indigenous lands, which make up a tiny fraction of the Earth's surface.
Sure.
The more we learn from science, Western science, about how to manage lands effectively through, for example, managed fires or agricultural practices, the more we realize that people have been doing this for thousands of years already.
Exactly.
Let me give you a specific example. In the Amazon, people have been using, if you burn agricultural waste at high temperatures, you can produce biochar. Biochar is basically powdered carbon.
Right.
And if you put the powdered carbon back into the soil, it's an amazing fertilizer. But it also takes that carbon out of the atmosphere and it puts it back in the soil where you want it. So people have been doing that for 1,000 years in the Amazon. And now finally, scientists working at universities have realized that biochar is an amazing way to grow more food and also take the carbon out of the atmosphere, because as the plants grow, they take the carbon out. And then you, instead of letting that carbon go back into the atmosphere, you put it in the ground where you want it. So it's a climate solution and it's a food solution. So that's just one example of indigenous knowledge that finally people are waking up and realizing, why aren't we doing this everywhere?
Exactly. I don't know what mankind are chasing in terms of, chasing modernity. This seems to be dismantling every other knowledge that we used to have and, we used to practice in our societies, right? So, how do you maintain, Katharine, optimism and resilience in the face of such a daunting global challenge?
That is the number one question that I am asked as a climate scientist. Number one.
Right.
Because around the world, most people are worried.
Right.
In almost every country around the world, more than 60% of people are worried. And in many countries, it's more than 80%.
Right.
The only countries where less than 60% of people are worried about climate change are countries where literally they don't know if their home will be bombed tomorrow, or they don't know if they can feed their children tomorrow.
Right.
And so it's not that they aren't worried about climate change, it's just there's something that's more urgent to worry about today, which climate change is making worse.
Yeah.
So most people are worried about climate change, and the first thing I would say is, if you're worried about climate change, that means you're normal. That means you understand how bad this is. You understand what's at stake.
Right.
You understand that this affects every aspect of our life on planet Earth, and a better future is not possible unless we address climate change.
Right.
So often people say, "Oh, Katharine, you're so optimistic. Don't you think we should be worried?" I'm worried. I'm very worried. And if you're worried, that means that you understand the problem too.
Exactly.
Here's the thing. Worry is helpful because if we're not worried, then why would we want to do anything?
Absolutely.
So worry is the first step. And if people aren't worried, they should be worried. But often we think that because people aren't doing anything or aren't doing enough, they're not worried enough. That's the mistake we make.
Right.
But what the social science shows is that if we're worried, but we don't know what to do, we become paralyzed.
Exactly.
Fear will actually paralyze us. And this comes from neuroscience, not climate science. Fear paralyzes us if we don't know what to do. And so the biggest problem we have right now is not that not enough people are worried. It's that the worried people don't know what to do. So that's why I focus so much of what I do on how do we move from worry to action? And for action, we need hope. Now, people will also say, well, isn't hope just saying everything will be okay? No, that's false hope. That's if you just say everything will be okay, it won't be okay. You'll just be happier until you die. So
Exactly.
It's interesting because real hope begins with recognizing it's bad. Because why do you need hope if everything's okay? If everything's okay, you don't need hope. You need hope when things are bad, and the worse it is, the more you need hope. So hope begins by recognizing it's bad. But then the second ingredient for hope is a better future is possible. A better future is not guaranteed, A better future might not even be probable, but
Right.
it is possible. There is a non-zero chance of a better future. That's ingredient number 2. The third ingredient is figuring out how do we get from where we are today to that better future.
Right.
And then the fourth ingredient is what can I do to help
Absolutely.
move us from where we are today to that better future. And for me, that is hope. And hope does not mean that we are not worried. In fact, it
Right.
means by definition, we are worried. If
We
we're
are
not worried, we don't need hope.
Right.
We're worried. And some days we might feel paralyzed. I have those days myself. But what I find my hope in is recognizing that I'm not alone on that path. If I look around, there are millions of other people who are on that path with me.
Right.
And so when I feel not just worried, but paralyzed, I stop and I go and I look for good news. I look for people who are making a difference all around the world. And then I find them. And then what I started doing 2 years ago is I started sharing that good news. And so now every week I have a newsletter, and you've probably seen it on LinkedIn.
Yes,
it's called
I did.
Talking Climate.
Yeah.
And then I have it via email, and I also have it on Substack. And now there's people from 50 different countries around the world who get this email. And every week I share good news about a solution that's happening already. I share not so good news.
Right.
Because we have to understand how it affects us. And then I share something that we can do to make a difference. And so that's how I practice my hope. And I encourage other people to practice it too. You have to practice it like a muscle. You have to practice it like an Olympic athlete.
Right. So, Katharine, we all as an individual has a role to play to sort of stand, against this huge problem, which we call climate change today, right?
We do. And it begins with using our voice in the place where we are. Because all of us, we're connected to people around us. We have friends, we have family, we have colleagues, we have neighbors. And so by using our voice, we connect people in our circles. And sometimes our circle might be virtual, online, or sometimes it might be physical, in person. We can connect people to start talking about what we can do together to make a difference. And again, we can't do it alone, but I know that we can do it together.
Wonderful. Katharine, on that note, thank you so much for your time. I'm really, really fascinated to have you on my show. Once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.